Today on Blooming Curious, I'm so pleased to welcome Daniel Burton. Daniel is a nature educator specializing in outdoor classrooms. Along with his team at Educated by Nature, Daniel leads children, parents, and teachers to develop connections and learn within nature. Through their various programs, Educated by Nature aims to increase the mental, emotional, and physical health of children and foster a deep love of the natural environment. So, welcome to Blooming Curious, Daniel. It's such a treat to have you today, especially after your whirlwind international trip that you've just come back from.
Thank you so much for having me, Edwina. It's such a pleasure.
Oh, it's so lovely to meet with you, actually, after following you guys and everything that you've been doing for 10 years. Listen, let's start with you. Can you share a little bit about your story behind
Mm.
Educated by Nature and what inspired you to start this initiative?
Mm. Great question. I love an origin story. Myself and my good friend and colleague and business partner, co-founder of Educated by Nature, Trudy Bennett, we were both teachers at Ballpark Community School. So a nature-based, nature-inspired, regio-inspired, then primary school and middle school. Now it's K to 12 school here in Perth, Western Australia. And we taught most of our time teaching together actually in the last 4 years of our time at Ballpark within an upper primary classroom. So we were teaching year 4, 5, 6. And our then principal, the founder of Ballpark, Gillian McAuliffe, challenged us to have a classroom outside for 2 days a week. So we took our class, we had a patch of green space at the edge of the school. It was a space called the Wild Space by the students. It was a space that they engaged with during recess and lunchtime. And we made that our classroom for 2 whole days a week. And in that time, we just saw an incredible way that children learn and engage in the outdoors, in nature, and the way that nature holds us as learners and supports so many aspects of our not only academic abilities, but mental health, social engagement, the ability to develop self-efficacy and self-worth. And we just saw our children come alive. Um, and so through that process and having that experience, Trudy and I were driven to support more educators to teach in this way and to provide more experiences for children to have these opportunities. So we stepped out of the classroom and started Educated by Nature 10 years ago this year, actually, as a way to advocate for this way of learning, for this way of working with children and advocating for children's right to play, their right to have an opportunity to connect with the natural world and, yeah, build deep connection.
That children have actually, I think, is being eroded every
Mm.
single day. It does worry me that we don't respect children enough to actually give them those things. That is really their natural birthright. Listen, I know
Mhm.
exactly what space you're talking about because I actually have visited Bold Park a few years
Uh-huh.
ago. But you spoke about how you saw children come alive and how they changed when you were in this outdoor classroom. Can you be more specific and say,
Mm.
what kind of changes did you notice in children and the way they were learning and the way they were interacting when you were outside?
Yeah, absolutely. We, like many classrooms today, we had a cohort of students who had additional needs, who had additional elements that got in the way of the learning process. Children with ASD, on the autism spectrum, with ADHD, with things like clinically diagnosed anxiety, a whole spectrum of different things that get in the way of their ability to learn and engage. And what we noticed when we had the outdoor classroom, when the students were outside in this space, those barriers seemed to disappear almost, or at least reduce dramatically. So their ability to engage within the learning process, to engage with each other, to find success in the process of learning and engaging with curriculum, with knowledge acquisition, with inquiry, all of those things got easier. Um, and apart from that academic element, we saw them come alive. We saw a spark. We saw inquisitiveness. We saw social collaboration. We saw those children that were quieter inside the classroom become the leaders. We saw those children take on leadership roles and really inspire the direction of the learning and the direction of the focus of our classroom projects and programs and things like that. Yeah, it was a whole new magical way of learning.
So tell me something. Did you just take your lessons from the inside outside? In other words, just a different setting? Or
Mhm.
did you actually change the way you taught because you were outside? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And we talk with educators a lot about exactly that question. And I think for us, it was a mix of both. There were definitely elements that was just our lessons that we were doing inside that we
Mm.
picked up and we took outside. And it was just doing them sitting on stools under trees or sitting in a circle gathered around an easel with a whiteboard on it under a tree. So having workbooks or exercise books and doing lessons sitting on logs, that was definitely a part of it. But also it was impossible for us not to be inspired by the natural space and the projects and the inquiry processes that came out of inspiration from that natural space. So then the natural space then inspired the work that we were doing. So it was a mix of both.
And you mentioned you had all these children with additional needs, neurodivergent children. Why do you think it became easier for them to learn when you were outside? Because you obviously still had to teach your lessons, right? You still did
Mhm.
your English or maths or other curriculum lessons. Why do you think they found that easier? What changed for them?
I think this is where we go into the therapeutic benefits of natural spaces and that being outdoors, being surrounded by greenery, having a different sense of auditory input. So the sound of nature, but also the lack of walls. So the lack of reverberation of sound of a
Mm.
class, all of those things joined, I think, to make it a much more cohesive, successful, calm learning environment.
I'm just wondering, I wonder if it's because
Mhm.
their sensory needs were reduced in the natural environment, and perhaps in a classroom, those sensory needs are just exacerbated, right? Do you think that's part of
Yeah,
it?
absolutely. And down to things like, so in a classroom situation, there's less room. So the facts are that, so at ballpark, the environments, the indoor environments are set up as flexible spaces. So it's not as if children are bound to a desk or
Mm.
have a single space. But even the difference of being in a flexible learning environment to going outside, there is more flexibility to choose where you sit to learn or where you stand to learn or where you lie down to learn, like how you utilize that space. The ability to have movement in that space while you're learning, all of those things, allowing the body to move in the way that it needs to in order to learn and engage, even down to the concept of if we were gathered for a class meeting, a class discussion, or an explicit teaching experience, children have the opportunity to pick up the leaves and sticks that were around them. We talk a lot with educators in our work at Educator by Nature about the fact that a child fiddling with a stick or a leaf is not interrupting their ability to listen, it's actually enhancing their ability to listen. And at the moment, I have a pen in my hand and I'm clicking that pen in our team meetings at Educator by Nature. I'm banned from having a clicky pen because I make too much noise. Our bodies need to move in order to listen and pay attention and attend. So nature provides us with those opportunities to do that in a much calmer way. I love the term old fiddlestick comes from the fact that our brain, if we pick up a stick surrounded by leaves, we can pull that stick apart and we can fiddle with that object. Nature provides, so at the moment, we've got lots of human manufactured plastic or metal
Mm.
fidget toys, but nature provides them. They grow on trees, literally, like a stick or a leaf is a fiddle toy, is a fidget toy, and provides something for our fingers and our bodies to do in order to support our brains to attend and pay attention.
And we do see in classrooms children with those additional needs all sitting there with their funny putty or whatever it's called, with their fiddle toys and all those kinds of things. And those things are actually quite expensive to purchase
Mhm.
if you were buying them as a classroom resource. So, yeah, you're right. Just go outside, get a few sticks and leaves, and they can fiddle with those instead and have a little bit of a
Yeah.
connection to nature. I do know
Mhm.
there's this one of the things I love doing is taking my children, my students out of the classroom, and sometimes we just go and do transient art or
Mhm.
whatever it might be. And there's this whole Japanese idea of doing the tree bathing where people pay
Mhm.
apparently large sums of money to be taken into
Uh-huh.
forests so just to lay there and absorb the oxygen and the feeling and the sounds. So yes,
Yeah.
there is strong evidence for the healing power of nature. So
Yeah.
that is, I think, where that outdoor teaching comes in, and that's how it has that very calming effect on
Mm.
children. Tell me, what do you think are particular skills that children develop when they start working and learning outdoors?
I think we
What
could
have you
talk for hours
seen?
on this one. I think one of the key elements that I really love seeing is children's ability to develop comfort and stillness and connection with the natural world. What we're seeing today in a lot of the schools that we're working with, a lot of the children that we're working with, is that children seem to have an aversion to even sitting on grass. So we're working with more and more children who don't want to sit down on the ground or get down on the earth. Maybe that's because they're feeling like they'll get their uniform or their clothes dirty. So there is, I guess, sometimes there's the fear that, oh, my parents will tell me off if I
Mm.
come home and I have a dirty uniform or dirty clothes. But also we're seeing that children have a fear of getting bitten by an ant or the bugs and insects that are in the grass. Now, I don't want to take away from the fact that getting bitten by an ant does hurt. We have
But
some
it is there as a
nasty
way.
ants. Exactly. But the fact is, unless you have an anaphylactic allergic reaction to an ant bite, you're not going to die from being bitten by an ant. You will survive that experience. So there's a lot to be said about the process of feeling comfort and being okay with being in natural spaces. And so that ability to feel that calm, that sense of being comfortable and okay, I think is a skill that is often overlooked in our process of taking learning outdoors. In that simple way to connect with the natural world is one of the greatest gifts and supports that we can provide for our students.
It's very interesting you say that because I've experienced lots of those kind of situations where there is just the tiniest little ant or even a bee buzzing around, and oh my goodness,
Mhm.
everybody goes into flat panic. And I'm thinking, guys, it's just a little insect, or there's something in the classroom, and you just go take the thing outside, or if it's like a redback spider, which we have here in Perth, which are obviously,
Yeah.
a redback spider bite for a child, and I just stomp on the thing and I go, Mrs. Coutinho is from Africa. Insects do not bother me. Don't worry about it. So we can just stomp on an insect. So they're always, oh my gosh. But I have seen this aversion. Children are so fearful of just anything that lives and breathes and crawls. They are really afraid of them. I do wonder whether it's because as well children don't have gardens anymore, or very few do. We've become
Mhm.
this society now, I think, where our houses are built wall to wall. There's not a lot of garden, or there's artificial grass, and they are not subject to natural things anymore. They don't really know how to handle them, and so that's what I think. It's our responsibility as schools and teachers. We really do have to grow gardens, and we really do have to
Mhm.
have outdoor nature spaces. And teachers also need to stop being afraid of
Mhm.
bugs and insects and those kind of things, because I think it's becoming more and more our responsibility to teach children that side as well, because they're not getting it in their homes very often.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think you've jumped on a point there, which we're really passionate about here at Educator by Nature, in that I think there's a responsibility and a growing responsibility to support our teenagers and our young adults at the moment, who are the people that are the next generation of early learning professional teachers who maybe are coming from a childhood where they haven't necessarily had those same experiences in the
Oh,
natural world. And so don't have those comfort levels with being outdoors, have those aversions to insects and bugs and creepy crawlies. And so we're just going to continue to contribute to this aversion to connecting with nature if we don't support that generation and the next generation. Because as you said, you and I are from generations who grew up and we have had outdoor experiences. We do have that connection. So we have within us an innate connection and a yearning to support children to connect. If the next generation and the generation after that doesn't have that internal drive, then we're at a danger of not having the passion or the drive to continue to connect the following generations.
I do worry about that quite a lot because you do see that generation, as you say, coming through. Here in Australia, we have the great outdoors. There are those families and those children that do have those experiences. We've got 4x4s by the dozen. People are going to the beach, they're going
Mhm.
into the bush, they're having those experiences. But I have also taught children in my class here in Perth. We are 15 minutes away from the beach who have never been. And
Yep.
that's sad. And that is actually quite shocking to me. What? You've never been to the beach? It's just there. So I think this is something that is really profound because we're seeing more and more mental health issues with children. And yet we know that the solution, the healing is right here on our doorstep. It's just being outside in nature, which can really help so much. I thought of a funny story actually when you were talking about the
Mm.
bugs. I don't know if you come across it. But it happens so often where a child will come to you and they need to go to the office to get some kind of soothing lotion or something because they've been bitten
Mhm.
by a mosquito or an ant. Now, when I was growing up, if I had to go to my mum and say, she'd go, just put some spit on it, seriously.
Mhm.
And we would just lick your finger and rub your saliva onto a bite. And that would be that. There would be no stingos or
Mhm.
gels or sprays to do any of that stuff. And so sometimes kids come to me and go, oh, just put some spit in it. So I'm just thinking, oh my God, they'll probably go home to their parents and go, just to put some spit in it. I'm probably going to get a phone
Mhm.
call to school to say, what on earth's going on here? Show some more caring for my child. But actually, what we're
Yeah.
doing is we're teaching them that, hey, it's not the end of the world. You'll live.
And I just want to jump in there, Edwina, and say,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot in that about showing children that they are capable and that they have autonomy and that they have the power within them to solve their problems. That I love working with children. Conflict comes up all the time. So one of the greatest tools that I've learned as a teacher is to ask the question when a child comes up to me with a problem is, do you need my help to solve this problem or are you just wanting to let me know?
Oh, that's
Essentially,
great.
do you want someone to listen or do you want someone to act with you or on your behalf? Because often I think as adults, we have the best intentions at heart and we want to support children, but we jump into action when maybe that's not what they were asking for. So sometimes with that insect bite or that bug bite or something that's scratchy, maybe it's just being a safe harbor that they can say, ouch, this hurts, or I'm uncomfortable. And that's okay. And for us to acknowledge, yeah, that ant bite does make you uncomfortable. That must hurt right now, but that pain will go away. That we don't need to jump in and fix that straight away. Sometimes they're
Yeah.
actually just coming to let us know.
And have you also found that having the outdoors, that children, it does make them more resilient? Because at our school, for example, we put out a nature playground. And what we discovered was that kids were always, I tell you, the office ladies must have a list from here to eternity for every child that comes into that office for a band-aid. And what we
Mhm.
discovered as soon as we put in the nature playground is that increased for a little while
Yep.
because kids were getting scraped more, whatever, because now we had logs and rocks and all these things. But
Yep.
then what we were doing is if they did come out, have a scrape, we said, oh, just go to the bathroom, wash it off. It's all fine. Look, obviously, if it was serious, we would attend to that.
Yeah.
But I'm talking
Yep.
about just little scrapes that really don't need much. And I think what it's done is it has lowered the amount of children going to the office for band-aids for just arbitrary reasons. And it does
Mhm.
really help to build that resilience in our children. So nature has so many benefits, including building resilience. So I think that's really important for our children, especially now when we've taken away so many of the obstacles and we're wrapping them more and more in cotton wool because we're afraid of the outside world and all the bad things that could happen to them. But we're also
Yeah,
depriving them of experiencing things that could really benefit them at the same time.
absolutely. And I think for me, that story goes, so our byline at Educator by Nature is resilience through connection. So at our core, we are about developing resilience, and that comes through our ability to connect with the natural world, with ourselves and with others. And we're big believers on the essence of anti-fragility, that
Mhm.
our children need to be anti-fragile. So Jonathan Haidt talks a lot about anti-fragility in his book, The Anxious Generation, and the fact that for children to be anti-fragile, they need the opportunity to experience discomfort, to experience adversity, to experience, as you were saying, those bumps and scratches and bruises, and that those things show them that they are actually capable. They can survive those experiences. Getting bitten by an ant shows them that they can get through that, and leads to a sense of more than resilience and robustness. It leads to
Mm,
anti-fragility.
that's very interesting. And it's like they used to say, you've got to be cruel to be kind or tough. And I think sometimes I wonder whether that's lacking now, is that our children
Mm,
don't have that mental toughness, that resilience anymore. And I think there is really a need to get that back so that we can face challenges with more courage and not as much anxiety.
mm,
And we can overcome these just little things in our everyday life, like coming across a bull ant or whatever it might be. It's not the end of the
mm.
world. And so I believe that your programs and having that nature space outdoors where children can connect with that and experience those moments where perhaps there is a challenge and can learn to navigate those challenges on their own. I think that is a real golden moment for children. I think that is a real gift that we can give them.
Yeah.
Daniel, it's not all unicorns and rainbows when we talk about how wonderful it is to be outside. Tell
Mhm.
me what challenges you've faced, because in your programs that you're offering, what challenge have you faced when you're integrating your nature based learning into conventional education programs?
So in the work that we do directly with teachers in schools, I think one of the biggest challenges is time,
Mm,
because our schools are so siloed. Curriculum areas are separated so extremely that the amount of time allocated for certain subjects or topics gets so limited. Whereas the beauty of learning outdoors, nature pedagogy, outdoor classrooms, whatever term you want to apply to it, is the fact that it can be really well integrated, that there's the opportunity to learn through an inquiry process in an integrated way that covers multiple learning areas, multiple curriculum areas at once. And so one of our biggest challenges is supporting teachers to see past timetables that are set that separate learning area times and go, here is an opportunity that we can move outside and cover lots of different areas and topics through engagement with the natural world all at once. I think that would be one of our challenges. And then linked to that, I think one of the biggest challenges educators face is transitions, is moving into different spaces, is how do we get from the classroom to the outdoor space? Maybe our school that we're working with doesn't have a suitable outdoor space on site, on campus. So maybe it's about how do we transition to the beyond space, to the natural parkland or bushland across the road or down the street.
mm,
So transitions become a challenge, and it becomes a logistical conversation, which has solutions and has answers, but it's supporting educators and teachers to work in ways that maybe they haven't had the need to work in before, or think outside the box in regards to transitions and movement and ways to get to different places efficiently. I think that's one of the big challenges we face.
and I love how you said you talked about that integrating not just nature, but just general learning across subject areas, as you said.
Mhm.
I think teachers talk about their workload all the time. And I often wonder whether that workload isn't because we've created more work for ourselves by, as you said, siloing our different subject
Mhm.
areas. I love because life is integrated. We do not
Mhm.
live in compartmentalized ways. So for
Yep.
me, teaching should be integrated, and that's my jam. That's what I'm good at. I rock at integrating multiple subject areas into one lesson. And that is not only a
Awesome.
time saver, but it also is an authentic learning experience. So
Mm.
I'm completely 100% on you with that. And that's actually what I'm trying to do with Blooming Curious is trying to say to
Yeah.
educators, I can actually help you and show you how you can make your life easier by integrating a whole bunch of stuff into one lesson.
Yeah.
Which is just and also so much more fun, my goodness, it's so much more fun, and we have an
Uh-huh.
issue where children can't see connections between, "Why do I have to learn this? When am I gonna ever need this in my life?"
Mhm.
And it's because we're not connecting different subject areas so they can see, "Oh, okay, we're doing this
Yeah.
because I could need it here or there one day or tomorrow,
Yeah.
for that matter."
Okay.
So that's really good. Tell me, what advice would you give educators in the real world that want to really integrate more nature based activities into their teaching, but they face all this resource issue and the curriculum issues? What advice do you give at Educated by Nature? Because you do this stuff where you're training people. So, what's the kind of advice that you give educators to get this cross curricular connection happening?
I think the biggest piece of advice that we can give educators is trust children. And that it can look different in many different contexts. But I think one of the things that we want to encourage educators to do is stand back and just watch. Angela Hanscom is an occupational therapist from the States, and she's written Balanced and Barefoot, which is a fantastic book, a really easy read. And I think it should be mandatory reading for all educators, not just occupational therapists. But she talks about stepping back and tuning in. And I think when we give children the opportunity and we trust them to take lead of their own learning and we stand back and we watch, what we notice is that they actually are incredibly capable learners. They are incredibly capable at discovering, asking questions, wondering, and going deeply with um, engagement in the learning process. I think it's flipping that model that as educators, we don't need to be, as teachers, we don't need to be the one doing chalk and talk or being the holder of all the knowledge, but we need to pass that trust over to the children and work as a collaboration to access the curriculum that we need to cover. But if we stand back and we trust children, they actually will naturally get to the learning that they need to with some creative backwards planning and backwards designing and input of some pebbles of wisdom along the way, I think.
I noticed when we were preparing for this interview, I asked you to respond to some questions. And
Mhm.
you said a great teacher shows a child where to look, but not what to see. So I think that's
Yeah.
where that comes in, where we're not that talk and chalk generation any longer. We are facilitators. So we're just showing them this is where it is. What do you think? What can you see in this? How can you develop this? How can you take this further? How can you write the sentence in a much more clear way or in a more descriptive manner? And I think things are changing. It does worry me. The mental health and well-being of children disturbs me greatly when I
Mm.
see what's happening every day in classrooms. And I personally am convinced it is because they're losing that connection to the natural world and we're becoming way more obsessed and reliant on technology. What's
Yeah.
your view as a leader in the nature space, so to speak, on technology in classrooms and how it's being used?
This is a big one. And going back to the book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, and actually the dialogue that has happened between Jonathan and Dr. Peter Gray over some of the elements of that book.
Yeah.
I encourage you to also look at Peter Gray's dialogue on that book as well. It's fascinating to watch. But I think so technology, and by technology, we're obviously here talking about digital technology and screen-based
Mm.
technology, it's something that exists in our world. We are utilizing the benefits of it right now by
Absolutely.
discussing and sharing information and content through digital media. So it's something that's not going anywhere, and it's something that definitely has positive elements. I think it comes back, like anything, to balance, that we need to make sure that we're not putting over reliance on digital tools in our classrooms and for children. And we're seeing the opportunities where we can get off screens and have that balance in our classrooms. Yeah, I think it's not about fighting against it and not having any of it in our classroom experiences, but it's finding out when it's a tool that is really useful and necessary. And like any tool, it's about knowing not only when it's important to use, but when it's important not to use it, and acknowledging those things.
In recent times, recent days, really, I've just been seeing children absolutely, there is no other word for it, but addicted. They are just, it's like an itch that they have to scratch all the time, that
Mm,
screen. And I'm trying to say to them, look, it has its place, it has its purpose.
mm,
You can use it to learn, to investigate, to read, to find out. But to use it aimlessly, just to sit on it and play a game, I don't believe that is doing our children any good at all.
mm.
And we know about all the research going into technology and its effect on a developing brain. And that's the part of it that
Yep.
worries me. So, no, we can't take it away completely. I'd love to ban it completely, actually, personally, in early childhood and then bring it out later because children are smart. People say, oh, you got
Mm.
to prepare them. But these kids learn it within a few minutes. It's not
Yep.
like us. I remember getting a new gadget and we used to read the manual. My kids never read a manual. They just
Yep.
learn to do it. That you learn on the go, so to
Yeah.
speak. So I don't, yeah, I don't believe that it has a place in an early childhood classroom, but I do think and I see its value as we go through, and especially for research when you're talking about inquiry-based research. But I
Yeah.
think, as you say, it needs a balance. I don't think it should replace pen and paper or pencil and paper in every single task we do. I think it has a place, but balance. And I'd love to see more educators actually look for the balance and also balance it with pencil and paper and not just have
Mm,
everything on technology, because that is also very tiring and hard for kids. So
mm,
that is something that does concern me. So let's move on and talk to me about your upcoming projects and
mm.
initiatives that Educated by Nature are working on. And what are the things that you are most excited about? Because I know you've just been on your overseas trip, talking a lot about nature and children, I'm sure. So,
Yeah.
would you like to share a little bit about that and some of the initiatives that Educated by Nature is offering, not just educators, but you also offer parents
Mm.
workshops and things, I think? You want to talk about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I think one of the programs and one of the projects that I'm really excited about and that we're really passionate about here is our mentoring program and our Nature Connection series program. So we're working with a whole bunch of different schools, but also starting to work more with organizations that can support us to be in schools that maybe can't afford a long-term program or project, because we know that budgets in schools are really tight. But putting emphasis on the ability of mentoring and walking alongside educators to support them to take learning outdoors. Because we were talking about at the start of the discussion is that often it's the adults that need a little bit of support themselves to feel comfortable in these outdoor spaces, to feel comfortable with the strategies in which they can implement nature-based classrooms, nature pedagogy, outdoor classroom programs. So our Nature Connection series is an opportunity for us to walk alongside a teacher or two and their class, model, and then also mentor them across like a 5 or 6 week process. We're really passionate about that program. And then another project that we're super excited about is we're starting to work more with year 7 and 8 into high school and doing some work in developing adventure playgrounds and looking at remembering that teenagers still need to play as well. And what are the play landscapes that they have access to in their recess and lunchtime? What do their play spaces look like? Because often in high schools, we move from a space in primary schools of having lots of play opportunities of environments that are supportive of play to high school environments that are paved areas with tables or park benches, or maybe the occasional table tennis table or basketball hoop. We're working with a school at the moment where we're developing an adventure playground that is going to be a space where their year sevens can go in and build and play and engage and still be children, and still play. So that's a brand new project that we're working on, but we're super passionate about the way that is going to grow.
That is super exciting. And are the children getting involved in that as well with you, the year sevens and eights? Are they designing the space or saying what they would like in this?
So I guess, so it's not a playground as in it's not a design, it is a space, an adventure playground. So junk playground, we bring tools, pallets, wood, rope, and we stand back and the children are building, playing, exploring. So what the landscape looks like is totally up to the children. The students are the ones doing this project. We're just enabling it to happen and standing back and supporting the educators, the mentors, and the school to understand the importance of it and to essentially get out of the way and let the students do their thing.
So you're essentially bringing loose parts to
Mhm.
schools in a bigger way for high schoolers. And I think this would also be really important for boys, especially for them to be able to do those kinds of physical things. And are you getting a lot of interest in that? Because I would think that schools would be hopping onto that.
We have just started. So we're working with one school at the moment, but our plan for next year is to launch that as a program that other schools can engage with.
That's really exciting. I hope that just takes off for you guys. So what about parents? What help can you give parents? What if parents listening to this episode right now, what can you tell them about how
Yeah.
that can help their children? Or if children have specific needs even, how can they help children
Yeah.
with programs like you offering at Educated by Nature or even just things they can do themselves at home?
Yeah. We offer a school holiday program called Kin Village. We also have a program called Kin Unplugged. And we've just launched actually a school holiday program for teenagers. So if parents are looking for an option for their children during school holidays, they can engage with that. And information about that is on our website. We also have a whole heap of video blogs and so the international tours and engagements that we have with professionals from around the world, we've done a whole bunch of interviews and put those on our website as well. So there's some snippets of advice and support for parents. But if I had to give parents one piece of advice in this video, it would be trust your children and provide them with the opportunity to play in ways that they remember playing as children themselves. So we talk a lot with parents about remembering what they did as children and how are those things available as opportunities for their children in today's age.
That's excellent advice. Yes, remember how you played as a child. Couldn't be better than that, right? Daniel, this has been really a fabulous chat, the two of us together. And I think we have so much in common. And it's just wonderful that we can actually bring this to teachers and parents. And I hope that people take away a lot of the advice that you've given them today. And I will place all the links for Educated by Nature in the show notes so people can get it there. Is there anything else that you would like, a parting message that you would like to leave for people as we finish up this episode?
I think I'd just like to say that we need to work as a whole community, parents, teachers, educators, children, politicians, policymakers, everyone to protect and uphold children's rights to play and the importance of connecting with the natural world.
Amen to that. Daniel, thank you so much for being on Blooming Curious today. It's been eye opening and just an experience that takes you back to thinking why we really do the things we do for children and with children. So thank you so much. To
Thank you,
stop
Edwina. Thank you for having me.